All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. I'm excited to introduce you to our presenter, Kathleen Dean Moore. Kathleen is an award-winning author or co-editor of more than a dozen books about our moral relation to the world. Formerly distinguished professor of environmental philosophy at Oregon State University, Kathleen's anguish about accelerating extinctions and climate chaos led her to leave the university to write and speak out about the urgency of action. Kathleen collaborates closely with musicians, ecologists, filmmakers, and artists to stand up for the planet. Her best known books are Wild Comfort, The Solace of Nature, and Moral Ground, Ethical Action for a Planet in Peril. Kathleen lives in Corvallis, Oregon, and in the summer she lives in a wilderness cabin where two creeks and a bear trail meet a tidal cove in Alaska, which sounds wonderful. Before Kathleen begins her presentation, I would like to invite Larry Daylaws, who introduced us to Kathleen's work, to share briefly. Larry?
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. Yeah, I just have a couple of words I want to say about my friend Kathleen. Um, Good to see you. Good to see you in the flesh, or well, not quite. Anyway, I just want to say that I first met Kathy when I read her wonderful book called Pine Island Paradox, and I hope this isn't going to steal any of your fire, Kathy, but I do want to just uh, mention a passage from that wonderful book, um, in which uh, she talks, she listens to her grandchildren. And she says, "What will our grandchildren say if we don't do something?" She says, the children say, "How could you not have known? What more evidence did you need that your lives, your comfortable lives, would do so much damage to the planet? Did you think you could wage war against nations without waging war against people and against the earth? Did you think it all belonged to you, this beautiful earth? You who loved your children, did you think we could live without clean air and healthy cities?" So that just, I read that and I thought, I've got to meet this woman. And it wasn't long after that I learned that she was teaching a writing course high up in the North Cascades of Washington State. And I signed up, and the rest is history. She taught in that course, she taught one of the most striking teaching lessons I ever experienced. Magnificent. She's a magnificent teacher. And it's really true, Kev. And so anyway, she, I think that's all I really need to say in introduction. Uh, she does have a new book coming out. She'll talk about that, I think, before you close, Kathy. I hope let people know what your new latest books are. Latest one is. Uh, we will leave a list of her books, and I think maybe what I'll do, Michelle, is write up a little summary of the ones that I would kind of especially recommend for our group. So that'll be available in the chat section. So with that, I guess I get to say, Kathy, welcome, and
Thank you.
you're
Thank you.
on.
Thank you so much, Larry. You're a dear man and a treasured friend. So yeah, I am a philosophy professor from Oregon State, and I am also a grandmother and a godmother and a great aunt. And I love to teach, as you could imagine, but I also love my grandchildren. So I left the university and I left it because I needed to tell people about our moral obligation to the next generation to take action. Now, listening to you talk just a few minutes ago, I think, these people do not need me. They are energized, they are galvanized, they are empowered. And it's so exciting to be invited into your community, but already you know everything that I have to say. You folks are inspiring. Just listening to you for 5 minutes has lifted me. So I confess that I am a little bit confused about what to say. I have a standard talk and I give it all over the place, New York City to Hawaii, all over the place. Um, it's fierce, it's angry, it's snide. I will not give that talk. And I need to tell you why. I was up in a northern college town just last December to give a talk to students at the university there, and I was really excited because this was the school where my granddaughter, let's call her Maddie, was a freshman. And this would be her first time hearing me speak. The subject was extinction, and knowing she was in the audience, I gave it everything I had. I read from an essay about her. I held my baby granddaughter in my arms and sang to her. She fell asleep, unafraid. I was so afraid. Poets warned us, writing of the heartbreaking beauty that will remain when there is no heart to break for it. But it's worse than that. I gave them facts. 500 scientists from a team from Berkeley wrote that unless nations take immediate action, by the time today's children are middle-aged, the planet's life-supporting systems will be irretrievably damaged. You know, what can that mean for the people we love? I asked them, what does it mean for Maddie? I told them that in the 50 years that I've been writing about the nature essay, the number of plants and animals on Earth has been reduced by almost half. I asked them, can you imagine all the plants and animals that have evolved on this planet over 165 million years? Their ancestors survived the asteroid that set the world on fire. They survived steaming volcanoes and colliding continents. Ice age after ice age, they survived wooden plows and pioneers. But the human choices of our generation have managed to kill off almost half of them in our lifetimes, on our watch. I said, my great-grandchildren can tear out half the pages in their field guides. They won't need them anymore. So I had done my thing and I walked to the back of the room where Maddie was standing with her father, my son. She was sobbing. She said, what am I supposed to do? And then she turned from me and walked away. Okay, drop in the next one. So later on, her father and I were sitting in the car in traffic, and it was pouring rain, and the window washers were flashing, as you can imagine. And here's what he said to me. I hope you don't ever do that again. He said it very softly. You can break people, you know, but think of what you could have offered her. He said, you know how to give her reasons to go on. You're a moral philosopher, for God's sake. Tell her what the world asks of her. Give her courage and determination, but most of all, give her delight. What you say about extinction is true, he says, and it needs to be said, but there's another truth, and it's far more important. And that is the truth that beauty and wonder still fill this world. She will be called to protect them. Help her. So, Jenna, the next one, here's what John, my son, said. Here's the list that my son gave me that I should say, what he said I should say. He says, tell people that the crises are real. You folks know that. That beauty and wonder still fill the world. That we are called to protect him, to protect them, and that we have a moral obligation to answer that call. So here I am. The first time after that experience with my son, facing a group of people who know these things and who have the power to change history. You have the experience, you have the time, you clearly have the expertise, you have the funding, you have the motivation, and you're poised to make a real difference. And I'm thrilled by that. I'm thrilled by the power of the people in this room. So let's see what happens today if I follow Jonathan's advice. Um, next slide, please. So the crises are real. Yeah, they're deep and they're dangerous and they are accelerating by the moment. And I love this world and I love my granddaughter. I love them too much to lose. I will not let them go. But the economic power of the fossil fuel industry is ferocious. And all these great industries of extraction, they're holding the greatest going out of business sale that the world has ever seen. So here I am at the Society of Environmental Journalists up in Missoula in the wintertime, and I've listened to the talks, including one by this guy who was a representative of the American Petroleum Institute. Huge man, black overcoat, bald head, shaved head, huge feet. Um, he was defending the oil spill as a thing that happened. And it happened that I walked out at the same time he did. And so here it was just you, he and I. And we're walking down across this icy bridge. And I thought, okay, Kathy, quick, you got to think of something. What are you going to say to him? So what I said is, so do you have children? Oh my God, the man stopped and he turned on me and he put his finger in my face and he leaned over me and he said, don't you ever, 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 ever underestimate the power of the fossil fuel industry. Okay, I said, I won't. And what what I want to do is tell you how I feel about this by reading you just a little bit of an essay. And this is the whole essay that I read to Maddie the other day, and it takes place beside a little pond in my writer's shack in the country. It's in Moral Ground. In the spring, when our granddaughter was born, I brought her to the pond so she could feel the comfort I had known there for so many years. Killdeer waddled in the mud by the shore, but even then, not so many as before. By then, the pond had sunk into its warm, weedy places, leaving an expanse of cracked earth. I held my granddaughter in my arms and sang to her then, an old lullaby that made her soften like wax in a flame, molding her little body to my bones. I held her close. She fell asleep in my arms, unafraid. I will tell you, I was so afraid. Poets warned us, writing of the heartbreaking beauty that will remain when there is no heart to break for it. But what if it's worse than that? What if it's the heartbroken children who remain in a world without beauty? How will they find solace in a world without wild music? How will they thrive without green hills edged with oaks? How will they forgive us for letting frog song slip away? When my granddaughter looks back at me, I will be on my knees begging her to say I did all I could. I didn't do all I could have done. It isn't enough to love a child and wish her well. It isn't enough to open my heart to a bird-graced morning. Can I claim to love a morning if I don't protect what creates its beauty? Can I claim to love a child if I don't use all the power of my beating heart to preserve a world that nourishes children's joy? Loving is not a kind of la-di-da. Loving is a sacred trust. To love is to affirm the absolute worth of what you love and to pledge your life to its thriving, to protect it fiercely and faithfully for all time. Ring the Angelus for the salmon and the swallows. Ring the bells for frogs floating in bent reeds. Ring the bells for all of us who did not save the songs. Holy Mary, Mother of God, ring the bells for every sacred emptiness. Let them echo in the silence at the end of the day. Forgiveness is too much to ask. I would pray for only this, that our granddaughter would hear again the little lick of music, that grace note toward the end of a meadowlark's song. Meadowlarks. There were meadowlarks. They sang like angels in the morning. So we know this crisis is real. We know that among people our age, 85% of us are worried. 57% of us are extremely worried. 62% of us feel a personal responsibility to help. And that 66% of people rarely or never discuss it. Well, we will discuss it now. It's not enough to be worried. I mean, it's not enough to be extremely worried at the state of the world. It also is important to be delighted. So Jenna, let's catch up here with the slides. That's the call to forgiveness at the end of the day that I just read to you. Now the next one. Okay, this is the second point Jonathan wanted me to say, is that beauty and wonder still fill the world. I don't know enough about where you are around the country, around the globe, to point to examples that you already know. Larry could certainly show us with his beautiful photographs about the beauty and wonder that fill the world. But I'm going to guess that no matter where you are, you still have frogs. And I'm going to guess that you have heard frogs sing. So let's just take frogs as one example to stand in for the rest of the astonishing world. And of course, being a writer rather than a speaker, I would like to read you this little essay called The Silence of the Frogs on Day 4. My husband is a scientist, a self-described hard scientist, as many of you probably are. You should see us try to paddle a canoe. Philosopher in the bow, scientist in the stern. I'm rejoicing in the sounds of the night, and my husband is explaining the biomechanics of frog song. Imagine blowing up a balloon, he says. Now, imagine blowing up a balloon made of your neck skin, he says. Now, imagine blowing it up twice your size. Now, he says, hold it there and tremble all night long. The energetics of this music are so tough, so much energy expended, that it could kill a frog. Some tree frogs have only enough energy to sing for 3 nights. 3 trembling nights. Imagine that. Imagine the silence of the frogs on day 4. I do. I sit quietly listening to that silence. Then he says, now, imagine swallowing a moth so big that you have to push it down your throat with your eyeballs. Cripes. We look across the lake, the path of the moon glittering with the discarded wings of 1 trillion flying ants. And we look at the moon itself, bulging out between black mountains. And we note in passing that we ourselves are sailing at 1,000,000,000 miles per hour through the darkness, spinning in a spiral galaxy slung across space, slung out with all the singing frogs and the quiet ones, all of us up to their eyeballs in swamp. And if we even think about our own sparking minds in that sparkling lake, if we think about the molecular structure of awareness, the biochemistry of celebration, the universe singing its own praises in the language of philosophy and science, then we have to hold on to keep from swamping the canoe. Astonished, yes, and shaken. And this is just the beginning. You start listening to frog songs and it gets even more wonderful. It might seem that I have been distracted from the philosophical point, but here it comes. What does it mean that the world is beautiful? I believe that beauty makes a moral claim on us. It closes the distance between what is and what ought to be. The same impulse that says, this is wonderful, is the impulse that says, this must continue. If this is the way the world is, then this is the way I ought to act in the world, with gratitude and celebration, with caring and respect, and above all, with a sense of responsibility to care for it, that it may continue to be. Okay, the next slide, if you would, Jenna. Jonathan also wants me to say that we are called to protect the planet and its lives. We are called. This is a challenge, and the point I want to make this morning is that it is a moral challenge. So yes, the crisis The climate crisis, the extinction crisis are technological issues, and they call for our smartest and most far-sighted innovation. They're scientific issues, and they call for brave and honest research. They're economic issues that call for good thinking about meaningful life-sustaining work and true wealth. They're political issues. Oh my God, they are political issues that will inevitably involve contest and courage. But I believe that they're fundamentally moral issues, and they beg and they demand a moral response. So let's work the logic of this. Jenna, slide number 8, if you would. Here's a scientific claim that you've already heard this morning. 500 scientists say that if nations don't take immediate action, by the time today's children are middle-aged, the life-supporting systems of the planet will be irretrievably damaged. Evidence-based, probably based on modeling. A person could look at that and a person could say, yes, and your point? Facts alone aren't enough. They don't tell us what we ought to do. Now, scientists say, oh, if we only knew, if people only knew, if we only could make them understand, then they would do the right thing. And scientists have done a heroic effort to try to make people understand the situation. They even take classes in communication. They try so hard. But what they don't know is that they are enacting a fallacy. This is called the knowledge deficit theory. The point is, we know. We know. And it's not enough to know. We also have to care. So we go to Aristotle, who came up with the practical syllogism. You knew that if you invited a philosopher, we would end up talking about Aristotle. Aristotle's practical syllogism is the logical form of making a decision about what we ought to do. Let me see the next slide, okay? Jen, okay. So here's the practical syllogism. Argument with 3 statements. The first premise is descriptive, empirical, scientific. This is the way the world is. The second premise is is normative, it's ethical. You can't get from a description of the facts to a description about what you ought to do unless you're willing to take a moral stand, unless you're willing to add into the argument a moral affirmation. This is what we value. This is what we believe is right. This is how the world ought to be. So if we know how the world is, we have a starting point. We know how the world ought to be, then we can come up with a conclusion about what we ought to do. Notice that the first premise is a world without a compass. The second premise is a compass without a world. But if you take the world and you put a compass on it, then you know which direction to go. So let me show you an example in the next slide. If we don't act, again, we've seen this before. If we don't act immediately, anthropogenic environmental changes will bring serious harm to the future. Okay, we've already talked about this. This is what the scientists are telling us. We supply the second premise. It's wrong to harm the future. It's a travesty to ruin the future for our grandchildren. It's a betrayal of beauty. It's wrong to harm the future. Therefore, we have a moral obligation to act to avert that harm. You do see how it goes. So the point is that we do a lot of work, spend a lot of money on premise number 1. We need to spend an equal amount of time and energy and passion thinking about premise number 2. So my colleague and I set about on this book project. Jenna, another one? We put together a book called Moral Ground, and we asked 100 moral leaders, people like Gary Snyder and the Dalai Lama and Bell Hooks, Wangari Maathai, Desmond Tutu, Barack Obama. We asked all these moral leaders, do we have a moral obligation to leave a world as rich in possibilities as the world that was left to us. This is the work of what we believe in. This is the work of art, and it's work of poetry and literature and philosophy and civic community like yours. It's storytelling in all its forms. It's the work of churches. It's the work of families. It's the work of parents talking with their parents and with their children. Traditionally, nurturing an ongoing discourse about enduring human values is the central role of the university. Imagine that. A lot of people say, what's the use of talking about values? Get real. Politics are moved by economic self-interest, the realities of the marketplace. Change is created by technology. But that's only partly true. Ethics has been a great force for change in the American tradition. Just look back. Almost every time our country turned on a dime, it was because of the building pressure of a moral conviction. Think of the forces that created the American Revolution. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And what are the truths? Great moral principles about human equality and freedom. The emancipation of the slaves, a long time coming, but based on shared ideas of human decency and worth. The civil rights movement, the end of the Vietnam War, and now think of these brilliant, strategic, courageous kindness of the Minneapolis citizens. They would not let their neighbors be taken because that was wrong. And next slide, if you would, Jenna. Does this all look familiar too? These are the no king signs, and I imagine that your parade looked an awful lot like that. Okay, so that's the point I wanted to make about how the moral questions that we do have that we are called, we do have a moral call to act. And the next slide, if you would, we have an obligation to answer that call. Now, the people who responded to our call for essays in the Moral Ground book gave lots and lots of different kinds of reasons. And I want to show you what they were. And I want to ask you which ones of these, I'm going to offer you the opportunity to choose two. Jenna, let's go to that slide. I tried to make it as large as I could, and I apologize if it's not, but let me just read them then. It reads like a poem. It reads like a prayer. It reads like a manifesto. Do we have an obligation to the world to live a world as rich in possibilities as the one that was left to us? Yes, for the survival of humankind. Yes, for the sake of the children. Yes, for the sake of all forms of life on the planet. Yes, to honor our duties of gratitude. Yes, for the stewardship of God's creation. Yes, because compassion demands it. Yes, because justice requires it. Yes, because we love the world. Yes, because our moral integrity requires us to do what is right. Number 10. Yes, because the world is wonderful. When I look at this list, I see two things that stand out for me. I would invite you to do the same sort of thing. The two that stand out for me are number 2, yes, for the sake of the children, for God's sake. And number 10, yes, because the world is wonderful. Here's Mary Oliver. It's our nature not only to see that the world is beautiful, but to stand in the dark under the stars, or at noon in the rainfall of light, frenzied, wringing our hands, half mad, saying over and over, what does it mean that the world is beautiful? What does it mean? I don't know if you think that the world was created by God or by the creative urgency of the universe. The world is irreplaceable, essential, beautiful and fearsome, beyond human understanding, astonishing. The good English word for that combination of characteristics is sacred. And the reckless destruction of the world is a desecration. Climate change is a failure of reverence. And every extinction, every suffering, every destruction is a profanity. And I would remind everybody of the etymology of the word sacrilege. Sacra, sacred, legere, theft. A sacrilege, a theft of sacred things. So we will all be prepared for anger and for grief. The world is a mystery of infinite and intrinsic value. Be prepared to love it in ways beyond our understanding. This wonderful love is what brings us to the work ahead of us and gives us courage in the struggle. Okay, I'm going to skip all the way down, if you would, Jenna, to number 16, because I want to remind everybody. Oops, let's just keep right on going. Remember Emily Dickinson? I want to talk about hope. No, let's go back to that little bluebird. Yeah, thanks. I want to remind everybody of Emily Dickinson's poem. I'm sure you have read it. Hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Now I call attention to what that little bird looks like in the human imagination. What is this little bird that perches in the soul? It always looks like this little, it always looks like this little teeny flitty songbird thing. And I object to that. I think that's the wrong bird. And so I'm going to close. I'm going to skip ahead and I'm going to close by reading this piece that I have written about hope. And it's in this book, Take Heart. A long time ago, in a small house in Amherst, a young woman named Emily Dickinson sat at a table beside an open window. As flimsy curtains blew over her page, she wrote her famous poem about hope. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Long after, artists illustrated her poem with a bird that always seems to be a perky little thing, sort of a cross between a bluebird and a wren with its flirty tail and open beak, a juvenile to judge from its big head. I protest on Emily's behalf. That is the wrong bird. This was 1861. White supremacists were gathering in armies and marching north. Loggers were advancing through the continent's virgin forests. Black slaves, having fled rape and lynching, hid in her neighbors' barns. Malaria, typhoid, and cholera ripped through families. If hope was perching in her soul, it was something far fiercer than a bluebird. I'm going to suggest a bald eagle with its hooked beak and terrifying claws. Jenna, would you show us that eagle? Like the one I saw come swooping over the inlet, swing out its awful yellow talons, and grab a pink salmon off the water. The eagle flapped to rise with her prize, but her wings caught in the waves and she fell back. The eagle and the salmon raised a murderous ruckus of light and sea. Then resigned, the eagle settled on the water and began to swim her prey toward shore. The nearest rocky point was a half-mile away, and the tide was running hard. But the eagle judged her trajectory, hunched her elbows into scoops, pulled them through the water, and in this way paddled toward shore, dragging the struggling fish. A fog bank blew in and blew out again. To the east, a cloud layer obscured the sun until up it rose, gilding the water. Through it all, the fog and the gold, the eagle paddled on. Finally, she reached the broken rocks and clawed onto shore, exhausted and bedraggled, dragging up a salmon, still flapping. This is what hope is in hard times. Not a sweetly singing wren, anticipating good fortunes, nor a gull, passively waiting for someone to bring him what he hopes for, abdicating any responsibility to feed himself. Hope in hard times is ferocious. It is strong and razor sharp. It is wild. It is stubborn. It is driven. It may choose its time, but it seizes its chance with open talons and drags it to shore, no matter how long that takes. Hope uses all its strength and wile and never gives up, knowing that if it stops trying, it will drown. In hard times, hope doesn't come to you. In hard times, you have to reach deep inside yourself for the courage and determination to keep trying. It's not a bluebird that sits on Emily's shoulder, tweeting comforting songs into her ear. Picture instead an eagle that pins her soul in its protective grasp. The eagle calls a screeching call that sounds like rocks scraping against a metal hull. Emily is right. There are no words to this song. Hope is an animal cry of rage and will. So call in all the feathered things that are perched somewhere in your weary soul, the harpy eagle and the sharp-shinned hawk. Call in the cassowaries and the shrikes. What we need is strength. Strength in numbers and strength in moral conviction. What we need is shrieking, roaring courage. Thank you very much.